Hey guys, what's up? Today's video is going to be the video I promised you about gender therapy and my personal experiences with it. This is a very important topic for any trans person who's just coming out or thinking about coming out to be aware of. Now, a lot of times, trans people are kind of scared of the whole idea of gender therapy. There's a lot of preconceived notions that a gender therapist is someone who's going to tell you you're crazy, or someone who's going to try to talk you out of being trans, or a gatekeeper who is basically there to select who is trans and who is not. But at the same time, under the WPATH standards of care, it is the essential first step on your road to actually being able to transition. If you want to be able to legally and safely get hormone therapy and ever be able to have gender reassignment surgery, you're going to have to start here. So here's the good news. Your gender therapist is not someone who is there to gatekeep and decide who is trans and who isn't. Your gender therapist is also not there to try and convince you not to be trans. And since these are, at the very least, very well-educated psychologists, usually with a focus on gender studies, they are not going to think that you're crazy because you're trans. What a gender therapist's job is to help you sort out things about your identity that may still be a little bit confusing, which is to be expected. We're not saying that being trans is being confused, but being trans in a cis-normative society is very confusing. There are some trans people who have known without a doubt 100% that they are trans since they were like 3 years old. And then there are other trans people like me who went our whole lives knowing that we weren't our sex and that on the inside somehow we were closer to the opposite sex, but at the same time had so many ideas just stamped into us by our upbringing that being trans either seemed impossible, undesirable, or otherwise just too frightening to take the risk. You know, people who've always basically kind of known, like in my case, that I was a girl on the inside, but didn't think that there was anything satisfactory I could do about the outside for that. After I learned that was wrong was when I first kind of started to realize I think I might be trans. So, especially in my case, gender therapy was extraordinarily necessary. The main things that a gender therapist is going to do are make sure that you don't have any resulting confusion, make sure that any kind of mental illnesses which may potentially have their effects worsened by hormone therapy are adequately addressed, and make sure that you have a good support network around you of people who are going to accept you and support you no matter what happens, because it is not going to be an easy journey whatsoever. So everyone's experience with gender therapy is going to be very unique based on exactly what kind of trans person you are, because we're all very unique. In my case, unfortunately, my life before I came out, the personality of who I was and everything was not really the best it could have ever been in the world. And that even persisted for a little bit after I came out before I started actually going to therapy to address a lot of this. In my case in particular, I had a lot of dependency issues, a lot of control issues, and a lot of really just kind of emotionally abusive issues towards people in my life that I brought close to me. My gender therapist helped me identify the need that I was trying to fill in the fact that I wanted to be a woman but always felt that I couldn't. And in my case, I tried to fulfill that need by constantly being with a woman and trying to control her so that I could basically turn her into the woman that I wanted to be but felt I could not ever possibly be in order to try to live vicariously through her. Now, not all trans people are going to be like that. And the fact that I'm trans does not make it any less messed up than it sounds, because that's pretty messed up. But when it comes down to it, the reason behind that kind of behavior was just the fact that I was sitting here basically envying every woman around me just for the fact that they were a woman and that I could not be, and I needed to make that woman exist and be close enough to me in my life that I would be able to basically experience the life that I felt I was being denied by how I was born. And additionally, as I came more and more in touch with my identity before I actually came out, there was a lot of pain that I could not deal with whatsoever. I started to realize that what I needed was possible, but very frightening, because I didn't know what would happen. I was fairly certain that most of my closer friends would accept me, which they did, and that my family would probably not be very happy with it, which kind of turned out to be the case in a very slowly unveiling way. In my case in particular, I was given this kind of acceptance that was really contingent on me actually going through everything and having surgery, maybe even having like some sort of CAT scan to show that I was trans before I even did anything, and just basically having to prove that I was trans to get my parents' acceptance, which turned out to be even harder than I thought it would be because of the fact that my parents did not have an accurate understanding of what a trans person is at all, and on top of that, they really were not willing to learn. So in my case in particular, I had to come home to live with my parents after going through a divorce. I was unemployed at the time, and due to the toxic personality I had been developing, most of my friends really weren't interested in seeing me very much at all during this point in time. I had no car. I had given my previous car to my ex-wife, and I really had no way of getting out of the house. And I had been forced to sign a contract stating that I was not allowed to cross-dress in my parents' house, which really meant that I was basically being forced to cross-dress every day in my parents' house. It wasn't too bad until the holiday season came, but because before then there were times when no one was home that I could at least be happy. After that, that went away. Everyone was just constantly home, and I basically just had nothing to do but sit in my room every day, hating myself. There was no escape to hang out with any friends where I could be myself around them. It got really, really bad over a long time. And then it all came to a head one night when I kind of agitated my father a bit to the point where he started just launching verbal attacks at me about how I'd never been in a real relationship before in my life, about how none of my friends wanted to see me because I was always depressed. And the last one was the kicker, when he told me that my problem in my life was that I needed to stop relying on my friends for my unhappiness and find it within myself. The problem with this was that he was telling me I needed to do the very thing that he was denying me the ability to do. He was right. That was the problem. But the answer was in being allowed to be myself. Because it's very hard to find happiness in yourself when you're not allowed to be yourself. And when you're first coming out, it may seem like it's all about clothes and makeup, but those clothes and makeup are the things that you can use to make sure that when you look in the mirror, who you're seeing is not that person from before that you don't know anymore. That the person that you're looking at and seeing is the real you. Eventually, over time and with therapy, you get used to seeing yourself with or without the right clothes or makeup and knowing that you're you. But during that first few weeks or months, it can be very traumatizing to have to every day wake up, look in the mirror, and be forced to see the boy from before. Which in my case became this person that I absolutely hated. I look back in my life and I saw these horrible things I did, and over time realized that this was not me. This wasn't right. It was hard to believe at first looking back. In a lot of ways, still to this day, I feel like I'm this kind of new person who has really just started to live. I remember my previous life and all the things that happened, often shamefully, but when it comes down to it, it feels more like I'm watching a video when I'm remembering these things than actually remembering events that I took place in. So I went a good bit in depth with my own personal story there because I wanted to outline the way that gender therapy can bring out things that you never knew that are going to be very, very important to know. That male personality was essentially a giant, very crappy coping mechanism that I had developed to deal with the fact that I was not allowed to be a woman. It caused me to be a very selfish, seemingly uncaring, and at times very hurtful person, who at the same time was carrying really a lot too much hurt inside to really look and see how that was affecting everyone else around me. And in the end, that personality, that coping mechanism had to die in order for me to live. Because that personality and that coping mechanism was slowly killing me and destroying my relationships with everyone around me. And even after coming out, I'm not sure how much of that I would have gained a grip over and realized and learned how to deal with and push aside and let myself shine through without actually having been to a qualified therapist who could walk me through all those things. And I had to deal with the fact that I essentially lost all ties with my parents. I had always felt like I was their favorite child before, and then when I came back home after coming out, it really felt like I wasn't even their child. And unfortunately, at the same point in time that I got kicked out of the house and was homeless in a hospital for about 2 weeks, someone took advantage of that period of time to start spreading some really big exaggerations and half-truths, and I basically ended up with 2 friends left from before that time who were able to see through everything. So my entire life was starting over, and that was an incredibly traumatic experience to have to go through. Not the kind of thing that anyone should go through without a qualified therapist to help them with it. And my story's not unusual. My story's not even all that bad. A lot of us end up going through a lot worse when we come out. Some people end up being killed for it. So, if you're trans and you've come out, and you haven't had to deal with any of these things yet, you still may have to at some point. And if you're trans and you haven't come out yet, you need to be prepared in order to do that. I think one of the biggest problems I had was not having a gender therapist sooner. I should have been able to figure all this out. I mean, I really should have gone to one from the very moment I started to question whether or not I could actually possibly be trans. Because another one of the things that a gender therapist can do for you is help you with coming out. And actually sit down with you and your family, with you and your friends at joint appointments, so that you can have an environment with someone who is trained in this to be able to help ease all of the changes that are coming along with you being trans. They make it a lot easier to understand. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, our parents and friends and everything kind of may think that they know better than us, when the fact of the matter is that who's going to know better about ourselves than ourselves. And in a lot of cases, they're just kind of listening to you by yourself and looking at the rest of your life behind you and being like, well then, you know, why weren't you trying to chop your bits off when you were a kid? Why were you able to get through the rest of your life without this being as much of an issue as it apparently is now? As opposed to having to just listen to you explain all these things as someone who is just going through a situation, they can listen to a trained psychologist who has studied these things, who is an expert on these things, and who they should be able to agree probably know a little bit better than they do. And I've seen it work for some people. I've seen people in my local area who went to gender therapy, who were in their teens and brought their parents with them, and their parents, who were not initially accepting, came around to accept and support them once they were able to actually have a better understanding of everything that was going on. And in addition to being able to help rid me of that alter ego, my gender therapist was also able to help prepare me for all of the challenges that I am going to face soon when I start my hormone therapy, and will continue to be there as I deal with any kinds of depression or emotional issues that the hormones may cause for me. And she helped me get through all of the trauma that I was going through and come out on the other side being able to let go of any hate I may have harbored for anyone and just say, well, you know what? If people weren't going to accept me, or even if people were going to start to be willing to make judgments on my life about things they'd never witnessed because they'd never happened, or make judgments about what's going on in my life now without even being a part of it, they're not worth my time to really even worry about. Because being a trans person, you're always going to have people who hate you for some reason or not. Whether or not it's because you're trans, or whether or not anyone's willing to admit that it could possibly have anything to do with you being trans if it's not direct, you're going to deal with people who don't like you, people who don't want to accept what you're doing, people who want to think that it's a choice, people who will accept you publicly, but then, say things like, I don't want that being around my kid. And it's going to get taxing. It's extremely, extremely mentally taxing. On top of, just the fact that everywhere you go, you're going to have people staring at you, pointing at you, being rude, whispering. It happens. You may end up with people trying to beat you up. You may end up with people approaching you in very socially inappropriate ways and not being able to really know how to deal with that. And when you're doing all of this on a day-to-day basis, it can just really, really, really wear on you. So, as much as we may not think we need a gender therapist to tell us who we are, which is not what they're there to do, we do need a gender therapist to help us sort out who we are and what parts of the person who we thought we were are not actually us. And we definitely also need that help to get through what is probably one of the most difficult mental experiences a person can ever go through. Because as much as people may say it's a huge adjustment to find out someone's trans and start thinking of them and treating them like the opposite gender, we're dealing with that too. We're dealing with the idea that our gender can be okay, which is kind of shocking and new when for our entire lives we've been told it's not okay. And on top of it, we're dealing with everything that comes from you having a hard time dealing with that. We're dealing with the weight from inside our own heads and the weight from what's going on inside everyone else's head all at the same time. And along with that, there's this lovely thing called dysphoria. The pain that comes from the incongruity between the brain's gender and the body's sex. It's one of the things about being trans that people seem to understand least. Because being a trans woman is not my choice to change from a man to a woman because it's just what I feel like. Being trans is my acknowledging that I have always been a woman to begin with, but that this body is not right. And before you are really aware of that and ready to do something about it, that pain just manifests as a sort of mild depression, something that you can't put your finger on, it's just, you're upset. Once you've actually come to and accepted that you can do something about your body, but realize how far away that is, every day that you feel like you're not doing anything can really start to feel like hell. It's like, the pot's at the end of the rainbow, you know how to get there, you just don't know how you personally are going to get there, how long it's going to take, what you're going to do about it. And that's luckily also something that a gender therapist can help with. And it's something that you can address in little ways to make sure that you're just able to get through the days and keep functioning. Because sometimes that's one of the hardest things to do, is honestly to keep functioning and keep going. There are times when I have just wanted to lay down and give up. And I'm so glad I didn't, because I have a lot of support from new friends, new family, and right now my life is pretty much just one of the most beautiful things that I could ever want it to be. The one thing that is missing right now is just to feel complete and happy in my body no matter what the circumstance is. But that's something that I know will come one day. And luckily, I took the first step to get there, and I went and saw a gender therapist. So, if you're trans, or you think you might be trans, but you're really not sure yet, my advice for you is as soon as possible, find a gender therapist, make an appointment. The circumstances are going to be different. Some of them will take insurance, some of them won't, some of them are even non-profits that will just help you out. So look for the resources available in your area, do some good searching, try to find local transgender alliances and groups. I didn't even know we had one here until I had already been kicked out. And once I found them, I realized how much help I could have gotten so much sooner if I had just looked to see if we had anyone in the area first. And then, once you get your appointment settled, just go to it. And you don't have to play it up for the therapist. They're not there to determine your gender based on gender roles. And if they try to start doing that, then it's time to start teaching them otherwise. They are there to assess your life's history. Everything that they can find out from you talking to them, to help you with really figuring out that identity and what the best path is going to be for you, and how you can be able to make your life continue to work throughout these huge changes that you're going to be going through. If you have any other questions about my story personally, or about anything else in regards to gender therapy and what my personal experience was with it, feel free to ask me in the comments, or if you'd like to keep it more private, you can get in touch with me on my Tumblr, or you can even email me, which I will include my email address for this video, because I want to be there to help you. I want to be able to be the person that I never had. It's like kind of my life's goal right now. I want to be able to be an advocate for any transgender person who needs it. So don't ever worry about bothering me. You're not. Just make sure you go into that therapy with an open, genuine, and honest attitude about what you've been through, who you are, and don't worry. You're not going to be turned away for not meeting whatever their qualifications are for whether or not you're a man or a woman. They're just going to take as much time with you as it needs to make sure that you really do know who you are and that you're ready for your hormone therapy and starting that transition. And it may take a week, it may take 2 weeks, it may take 6 months or a year. But no matter what, be patient with it, because I promise you, they're not wasting time. There can be a lot to sort through for some people, and a lot of concerns that really need to be addressed before you go and do something as potentially dangerous for your emotional state as flooding your body with hormones that it's not used to being flooded with. Even if they're the hormones you need, it's going to be a shock to your system at first, and you need to make sure that you are prepared for that and have absolutely everything in place to be able to handle the possible ramifications. Because even if you've come out, once you start hormones, your body's going to start changing, and it's going to be difficult to hide. If you're not out completely, you could face things like losing your job, losing contact with other family and friends, so you need to be sure that you're in a safe place before you start that. Because estrogen does increase the risk of depression, and nothing could, potentially be as depressing on top of things as losing a job that you thought would not be a problem, or losing family members that you thought would always be there. As always, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned. I'll be starting a new little series hopefully soon that should be exciting, as well as starting my interviews, with my first interview being with my roommate, a trans man named Asher. I'm looking forward to that coming up. And hopefully, if I'm able to get enough money in to be able to afford my appointment and my hormones, I should be starting my own hormone therapy within the next few weeks, which is also something I'm extremely excited about, and extremely excited to be able to share with you and hopefully have to be for your benefit. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, follow me on Tumblr and Twitter, and since in my case insurance does not cover hormone therapy either, if you'd like to help with that process, there is a link to my GoFundMe in the description. It will also help to allow me to continue making these videos and doing everything I can for us. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, be yourself.